Welcome everyone. My name is Kieran, and today I am hailing from the wonderful but rainy Manchester. Um, so today we are going to explore persuasion. So that is the art of influencing how people think, feel, and act. Persuasion is all around us, whether we're reading the news, scrolling through social media, watching an advert, or even chatting with friends. Persuasion is at play. Now, this workshop will introduce you to the three classical modes of persuasion. They are logos, ethos, and pathos, and the many techniques used to bring them to life. Now, by the end, you should feel confident spotting persuasive techniques and using them in your own speaking and writing. Our learning goal is clear. We're going to revise the three modes of persuasion and learn specific strategies and devices that will help us apply them effectively. This means we'll not only review the theory behind it, but also look at concrete examples of how these appeals appear in everyday communication. So as I go through, keep in mind a couple of questions. Which strategies do you already use without thinking? And which could you add to your persuasive toolkit? So, before we get stuck into it in detail, let's pause and reflect. Think about where you see persuasion in your daily life. Is it on YouTube, politicians giving speeches, a friend convincing you to go out instead of studying? Now, consider how persuasion might look different depending on the audience. For example, persuading your teacher requires a different approach than persuading your friend. Okay? So keep these ideas in mind as we have a look through the other slides coming up. So persuasion is not just something we study, it's something we live. We can find it in texts like advertisements, media articles, political speeches, propaganda, opinion columns, podcasts, and open letters. But it also appears in everyday life as well. A teacher persuading you to study, a sibling persuading you to lend them some money, or a friend persuading you to join them at a concert, or something like that. The skills you develop today aren't just for essays or debates, they're also useful in any situation where you need to influence others. Whether that's convincing your parents to extend your curfew, or writing a compelling job application, persuasion is a skill that is always worth mastering. So, to persuade successfully, you need to shape your message around three key elements. And they are, as you can see on the screen, context, purpose, and audience. Context, think about the setting, the timing, the background of the speaker, and the recent events. For instance, a climate activist speaking after a major flood might be more persuasive because of the urgency of the situation. Let's consider purpose. Ask yourself, what do I want my audience to think, feel, or do? Do I want them to just agree with me? Do I want them to take action? Or do I want them to simply see things differently? Also, consider the audience. This is crucial, this point. Think about who you're addressing. Consider their age, their background, culture, interests, and values. The language you'd use for a group of teenagers will be very different from the language you would use for a professional conference. Now, by carefully adapting to these three factors, your message becomes sharper and more effective for the audience. So, the study of persuasion is not just a modern idea, it goes back thousands of years. Aristotle, the Greek philosopher from the 4th century BCE, was one of the first to systematically study rhetoric, the art of persuasive speaking. He identified three key appeals that form the foundation of persuasion, and we're going to see these in the next slide. But these ideas are timeless. They are not just an ancient Greece idea, they are a modern idea, medieval idea, and for the future as well. So, whether you're reading an ancient speech or you're looking at a modern advertisement, you will see these three same appeals at work that Aristotle mentioned a long time ago. So let's have a look at these in a little bit of detail then. Okay, so there are three appeals according to Aristotle, and they are logos, which is persuasion through logic, facts, and reasoning; ethos, which is persuasion through credibility, character, and trust; and pathos, which is persuasion through emotion and connecting to people's feelings. Now, individually, each of them is powerful, but the most persuasive messages often combine all three of them. For example, a charity advert might use logos by showing statistics about poverty, ethos by featuring a respected spokesperson, and pathos by showing emotional images of children in need. So by putting them all together, you have connected all of those persuasive techniques into one powerful message. Okay, so looking at them in more detail now, let's move on to logos. So as you can see here on the screen, logos is the Greek word for word, reason, or plan. So what does this actually mean? Well, with logos, it appeals to the audience's sense of reason. It makes your case stronger by presenting facts, evidence, and logical reasoning. So the most common strategies for this include using expert quotes, referring to reliable sources or data or statistics, things like that, using well-known theories or principles, including real-life examples as well. So logos strengthens your argument by making it seem both rational and then grounded in truth, in correctness. So as previously mentioned, facts and statistics give your arguments credibility. They make them sound scientific, like you've done some research, and most importantly, they make them seem reliable. So, for example, like we can see on the screen, 85% of Australia's population lives in urban areas. So this feels very hard to dismiss, to throw away, than simply someone saying most Australians live in cities. Okay, because you have that percentage there, because you have those numbers, it makes your argument seem more solid and verifiable. Another key strategy is citing experts. So if an audience sees that a respected authority agrees with you, they are more likely to accept your view as well. So, for example, it says here, Professor Howard Ong's research shows that the pill boosts our immune system. Now, this works because people assume experts have knowledge and authority that they don't necessarily have. Okay, you're more willing to accept someone else's views if they are an expert in that area, and you don't know about that yourself. Also keep in mind that the language that you choose matters. So using formal, sophisticated language makes you sound more professional and credible. For instance, you are cordially invited to attend the ceremony. Feels more serious and respectful than, hey, come to the event. So formal tone can build that trust with the audience and make them take you more seriously. Now, let's move on to one specific technique, which is the tricolon. It is one of the most powerful rhetorical devices, and you will see this everywhere. After you've seen it here in this presentation today, you'll see it everywhere in the world. So this is basically the rule of three. Presenting ideas in threes makes them more memorable. For example, cruel, wasteful, and a disgrace. This is more powerful than just saying cruel and wasteful, or wasteful and disgrace. There is something in our brains which makes threes more significant, and when we say this, it resonates more with our audience. Also, if you've ever had a look at Martin Luther King's speeches, his I Have a Dream speech, he repeats this 3 times. So the rhythm and balance makes it stick in our minds more than just any ordinary speech. Okay. Also consider things like Tony Blair's education, 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 or if you're looking at real estate or something like that, location, location, location. Okay? So this is something that you'll see all over the place now. So now we're going to look at the concept of jargon. So jargon is that specialized vocabulary for a particular field. So it signals that you're an insider, an expert, or someone who has a deep knowledge of a particular subject. For example, a lawyer uses legal jargon in court. You wouldn't use this with your friends and family or the ordinary person on the street. For a specific situation, you use specific vocabulary. Okay? Just the same with surfers use some specific vocabulary about surfing that they wouldn't use in other situations. So if you are part of that specific situation, then using this vocabulary can be persuasive, but it can also be risky. If your audience doesn't understand the vocabulary, it might create a distance from them, like you are alienating them, rather than showing some trust towards you. So let's consider some logos in action. So we got this first one here. Did you know recycling one aluminium can saves enough energy to run a TV for 3 hours? Okay, so this is appealing to statistics. Okay, we've also got a 2023 National Geographic report found over 2 million plastic bottles are sold every minute. Okay? So again, we're appealing to some statistics, numbers there. Our school's recycling program won a national award for reducing waste. Okay, this is showing the credibility, because someone else has had a look at it and given it an award, so they must be experts in that field. So each of these sentences here appeals to reason with some hard evidence or some measurable achievements. Okay, so now let's move on to ethos, which means character in the Greek word. So ethos is all about credibility and trust. If your audience believes that you are an honest person, you're knowledgeable, that you're ethical, they are more likely to agree with you. So think of it like this. Would you take medical advice from some random stranger on the street? Or would you take the advice of a doctor with 20 years of experience? Now, we instinctively trust people with credibility. So, to build ethos, you can share personal experiences that connect you to the issue. You can refer to other credible sources. You can highlight your own expertise or your own credentials, or you can use a tone and style that makes you sound trustworthy. One of the simplest ways to build ethos is to share a personal story. For example, this happened to my daughter as she rode home from school. Or, in my local community, I started a recycling program. These anecdotes make the speaker relatable and human, and they show that the issue is both real and has been experienced firsthand by you. So people are much more likely to trust you if they feel you have lived through what you're talking about. Now, another strategy to use is something called allusion. Now, this is referencing something familiar to the audience without explaining it in detail. So as you can see in the example here, calling someone a Scrooge instantly makes us think of greed and stinginess. Everybody should be aware of Scrooge from the Dickens story. Or describing something as a Trojan horse suggests it's dangerous but disguised. Okay, we should all have a good knowledge of ancient Greek mythological stories there. Allusions build ethos because they show you are well read, and it also connects your ideas to some common culture, history, or literature. They also help audiences to grasp complex ideas more quickly by explaining something that they already know and understand. The next thing to think about is colloquial language. So this is everyday language that can also help to build ethos. So why does this happen? Well, because it makes you seem down to earth and relatable. For example, we need to change our she'll be right attitudes and give everyone a fair go. This feels both approachable and authentic. It shows the speaker is not talking down to the audience, but rather connecting with them as equals. So it has this more egalitarian idea. Testimonials are another way to add ethos. They involve using the voice of others. So these could be experts or celebrities, ordinary people, to help build trust with the audience. So, in the example, fashion model Marceline Anderson prefers ethical brands that don't test on animals. Okay. Or, I started following these recipes and I've lost half my body weight. So, testimonials add weight, pardon the pun, because they suggest the speaker is not alone in their opinion. Others support your opinion too. Sometimes credibility comes from showcasing your own qualifications or achievements. For instance, as a 3-time Grammy Award winner, I know how hard work pays off. Or I've been a a clinical psychologist for over 30 years. Listing credentials like this reassures the audience that you are an authority who is worth listening to. But it's important to use this sparingly. If you promote yourself too much, it can make you sound arrogant rather than credible. So you need to find a nice balance. So here are the examples of ethos in action. So the first one, as the student council president, I understand the importance of listening to everyone's opinion. Okay, so you are appealing to your own position of some post or some powerful position in order to make yourself seem more credible. According to marine biologists at Monza University, reusable bottles help protect oceans. So you are appealing to the expert opinions there at Monza University, Monash University, forgive me there. And lastly, winning this award was proof of years of sacrifice and dedication. So this shows that you have lived through what you are describing about, and you have some insights to give from it. So each of these builds credibility through personal responsibility, expert sources, and recognized achievements, respectively. So the third one we're going to have a look at is the idea of pathos, which is both the idea of suffering but also experience. So pathos, this appeals to emotions. Now remember, humans are not purely logical beings. We're not all computers. We are emotional beings. So pathos works by creating feelings such as sympathy, pride, anger, excitement, or even guilt. They are all strong in how they persuade us to do things. So advertisers are very good at this. They use pathos all the time. Think of the animal welfare charities showing those sad dogs or donkeys, or motivational speakers who inspire hope. When people feel something strongly, they are much more likely to be persuaded. Now, this is where inclusive language comes in. So inclusive language is using words like we, our, and us. For example, we need to act now if we want to preserve the earth for future generations. So this makes the audience feel included in something, as though they and the speaker are on the same term. It creates a sense of unity, shared responsibility, which is extremely persuasive when it comes to kind of public relations. So, direct address is about using you and your. For example, you want to make sure your doors are locked at night, or you wouldn't want your children to face bullying either. This forces the audience to think personally about the issue. They're not just thinking about the issue in a rational, logical sense, but in an emotional sense as well. It is no longer abstract, it is about them. That personal connection makes the argument much harder to ignore. Let's also look at figurative language. So this is the idea of metaphors, similes, personification. Now these add emotional color to your ideas. Saying, the chair groaned under the weight, or he swam like a dolphin. This creates imagery that connects with our senses. Abstract concepts suddenly become very vivid and memorable. So advertisers love using figurative language because it makes products feel exciting, powerful, comforting, depending on the emotion that they want to trigger. Okay, so the next thing we're going to have a look at is here hyperbole. So hyperbole is the idea of deliberate exaggeration. For example, there are a million reasons why this won't work. Now, there are probably not a million reasons, but there's probably a big number of reasons. Okay? So by saying there are a million reasons, by exaggerating, you make the number seem so big that it is much more than you're actually describing. We've also got the other example here of if I don't get an A, I will. Okay, so of course this is not literally true, but you have heightened the seriousness of the issue. So hyperbole grabs attention and pushes your audience to see the situation as more urgent or dramatic than they might otherwise believe. So emotive language uses words with strong emotional associations. For example, some poor little puppies are beaten and neglected. The words poor and little stir those feelings of sympathy. Or, she was a proud descendant of brave explorers. Here, the highlighted words proud and brave inspire admiration. So, carefully chosen emotive words can spark powerful emotional reactions in the audience. Repetition reinforces an idea as well. So politicians often use this technique to hammer home those key messages. For instance, we're sorry for being messy, we're sorry for being moody, and we're sorry for being typical teens. Repeating here, we are sorry, highlights the point. Whether it's at the beginning, this is called anaphora, or at the end, epiphora, repetition makes words stick in our memory and sound more convincing. Now, let's consider the last part here. All right. So, a rhetorical question is a question that you've asked, but you don't necessarily need an answer to it. So, for example, can we really afford to ignore the problem? Now, the audience knows the implied answer, which is, of course, no. Well, you're not actually expecting for them to shout out and say no, but you're making them feel it because that is the most obvious answer to come from it. So this device works because it forces the audience to engage mentally, even if they can't do it literally, and you are kind of guiding them towards the answer of what you intend. So it positions them to agree with your own point of view. So let's consider some examples of pace-offs, some further ones. Okay. So let's consider the idea of emotionally charged descriptions. So imagine walking past lonely animals in the shelter, their eyes filled with hope. Or we can look at appeals to ideals. So wouldn't it be amazing to save panda cubs? And lastly, the idea of figurative exaggeration or hyperbole. This juice is like a party for your taste buds. So each one connects with feelings, not facts, and makes the audience more likely to agree with you. So, to wrap up, remember that persuasion is most powerful when it blends all three of those ideas. They are logos, ethos, and pathos. So always shape your language around the context, purpose, and the audience, and aim to balance facts, credibility, and also emotion. Whether you're writing an essay or giving a speech or trying to win an argument with your parents, these tools will help you to be more persuasive. So, as a little extra here, let's try and put this theory into practice. We've got a passage here on the screen about a gardening club. So I want you to read it carefully. And I want you to spot the places where logos, ethos, and pathos are being used. So remember to look out for logos, statistics, research, health recommendations, things like that. Ethos, have a look at the speaker's personal experiences, if they've been mentioned in the gardening club. And lastly, we can the emotional appeals to well-being, friendships, community, things like that. So maybe pause the video, take a couple of minutes, consider which ones match which, and then on the next slide we will share the answers, and we will match each technique to one of the three appeals. Okay, so pause the video now, and then we will rejoin. Okay, so if you have a look here on the screen, these are the phrases which could be considered one of those three appeals. So hopefully you found these. There may be a couple more in here, but let's consider each of them in detail. So let's consider the first one here. Having spent 2 years nurturing my position in the school's gardening club. Now, which of the three is it? Well, it is probably ethos. It builds credibility. The speaker is demonstrating their personal experience and commitment, and making the audience more likely to trust their perspective. The second one about fostering friendships, contributing to our model, our school community, and even improving my well-being by connecting with nature. This is an example of pathos. So this highlights emotional benefits such as friendship, belonging, and well-being, and these trigger those positive feelings that persuade through emotion rather than through logic. The third one, the World Health Organization recommends upping our fruit and veggie intake for optimal health. This is an example of logos. So this refers to a credible international authority and uses some scientific health guidance. And remember then, facts and expert endorsement appeal to logic and reason. We've also got here, studies show gardening reduces stress and promotes mindfulness. So this is also an example of logos again. So this is citing research and evidence, and this strengthens our argument logically. So data-driven claims reassure the audience that the point is backed up by some kind of science. We also have another possible one here, which we haven't included, which is that it says here, something we all crave in our busy lives. So this could be an example of pathos. This connects emotionally with the audience by acknowledging stress, and also the universal desire to have a bit of peace and balance in our lives. Okay, so if we consider this last one, so join me in the gardening club. Let's cultivate not just delicious food, but a healthier, happier school community together. This could be an example of both pathos and ethos. The invitation uses inclusive language like join me, let's, together, which creates the idea of unity, emotional appeal. But at the same time, the speaker positions themselves as a credible insider, already involved in the club. Okay, so that is the idea of ethos. So, to finish, let's recap. Logos is connected to the ideas of logic and reason. Ethos is connected to credibility and character. And pathos is connected to emotions and feelings. So when combined, those three create truly persuasive communication. So the next time you read an advert, or you listen to a politician, or even write your own argument, ask yourself, which appeals are being used, and how can I use them more effectively in my own work? All right, so that is the end of our workshop for today. Thank you for listening in. Please remember to click like and subscribe, and yeah, look out for our next video. I hope you enjoy it. Okay then, everybody. Bye-bye.